Open buttonhole filler, you see here making this little fox face, is very useful for filling all kinds of shapes. And it can have kind of a denser look or a lacier look. Here it is making an acorn cap. You can fill a whole circle, or you can do something like that, the mushroom, and make a lot of different choices with it. So let's look at how to get started with it, some of the basics. There are a lot of different things to consider, so I really want to take some time and break it down, so bear with me. First of all, you build this on back stitches. So you have to back stitch around the entire shape that you want to fill. Now here I'm going to work top down, and you'll notice that this, I'm going to fill a little bit of this curve and then continue filling all the way down here. So I can't just start all the way over here, because once I ring this in, then I really won't have a good way of filling in all the way down to here. So I'm just going to do a little bit of it up here. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. But I want to show the basic buttonhole stitch that you use. Now I have come up between two back stitches, and I should say that I'm using fairly large back stitches here, so that means my tension can't be very tight as I'm sewing, and I'm going to get more of a lacy open effect where you'll see more of the background showing through. If you wanted something denser where you saw more thread and less fabric, you have to make smaller stitches. I chose larger stitches so it would be easier to show the pattern and show the effect and just show how to do the stitch. So I'm using a tapestry needle, and that means it's less likely to catch as I'm going under the thread, but not under the background fabric and not under the applique. So you'll notice as I'm stitching left to right, my thread is under my needle, and so the thread is under it left to right. Or you could just look at it as you lay the thread down and the needle is just coming. It's always the same, that the needle is just coming out over the working thread. Now, because I have a larger back stitch, I don't want to pull these up really tightly. I want the tension to match the back stitch size. So we'll do another one. Make sure that my thread is under the needle. And I think I've got about 5 or 6 stitches that I have to do here. Sure, I've got a lot of threads and needles going here, so just bear with me. Now, you can see that I'm doing a symmetrical shape here. At least that's my hope, is to make this nice and symmetrical. And certainly doing something like the fox, I want that to be symmetrical. So this takes a bit of planning, because at least for me it does. I don't do so well when I'm having to eyeball things. Notice that I have made these 2 little marks with an erasable pen. What I did was I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and put a mark on stitch number 5, and then I counted up 5 stitches here. So I know now that this is going to be centered across the top. So now I've gotten to the end of my first line, and I'm going to go, instead of coming down this way, I have to anchor my thread a bit, so I'm going to go out under the stitch. And I'm going to come back down through the next stitch. So I'm using these stitches, they've become the side of the shape now, like the side of a dome. Okay, they're a curved side, but they're the sides. So that is just getting me prepared to take the next stitch. And I'm leaving this a little bit loose right here. I can always pull it up tighter, but I want to see this stitch right here because I'm going to need this so that I can stitch into it for my next stitch. Now, here's something people find tricky. Now I'm going right to left, so my thread can't be under the needle the other way because I'd be putting an extra twist in it. So when I'm stitching right to left, the thread is passing under the needle right to left. So it just matches the direction you're going. I mean, you don't want to overthink this. When I'm going left to right, it's left to right. When I'm going right to left, it's right to left. Now here you'll notice my shape is going to get bigger. So I want to increase the number of stitches I have. I had 5 here, but I can't just do 5 all the way down because I'd end up with a bunch of big open stitches by the time I got to the bottom, and it just would look weird. So right where I went into this loop, I'm going to do another stitch, another buttonhole stitch. I want to increase or decrease at the edge of the design. I don't want to get in here and think, oh, everything's getting kind of pulled out of shape, and try to add another stitch here. Maybe in the next row I'll add them over here, because it just starts to look messy, like immediately. You'll see if you've made a mistake, because you'll just think, oh, that really is not the effect I was going for at all. So I would continue all the way over to the edge, and because I increased on this row on the right side of it, and I want this to look symmetrical, when I get back over to the left side, I'm going to increase stitches here. And this takes a little bit of looking to see what stitch am I really in. Okay, yeah, I'm in this stitch. So now we have to go back. We haven't used this stitch yet, so we have to go out that stitch, back into the stitch next to it, and so I pull that up a little bit tightly, but no worries. I can just release that and think, yep, there's my stitch that I wanted to stitch into. And now we're going right to left again, so the thread is going under the needle right to left. And I'm increasing, so I'm going to do 2 stitches in this one. So I treat these stitches that I've made just the way I treat the anchoring back stitches that I made along the top. I'm creating my own space that I can anchor into. And see, this is all like a little loose, hat or something on top of the thing. So in a minute here, I'll talk about how in the world do we get this all anchored down to end it. But you see that some of the shapes are like this one that I showed, where I have to increase. Here's one where I'm going to have to decrease as I go down. I find it's always easier to lose a stitch than to gain a stitch. In fact, you can lose stitches without even trying. So here I'm going right to left. When I get over to this edge, there we go. Now I haven't used this stitch yet, so I can go in here, come back around. And here's where I'm going to decrease. So I don't want to use that extra stitch that I just made in there. I want to skip that one and just come over here into a stitch. You can see how it's very natural to decrease. You'll know where you need to decrease, but you just don't want to get out here into the center. Again, you increase and decrease at the edge, because you don't want to get into here and think, oh, this is, I need to tighten it up. I'll skip this one and just come over here, because you're going to have a hard time. See how that's just going to be unacceptable. You're going to have a big floppy loop in the middle of it, and you're not going to make a pretty fox face or butterfly or whatever shape you're trying to make if you're doing something like increasing or decreasing in the middle. Now, the other thing often you don't see an explanation of is what to do when we get down to the bottom edge of the piece, whether it's a straight line or a circle or whatever shape. So here I've been going in the right to left direction, and what I did before I even started here was I counted how many stitches. Okay, that might have been a little bit out of control to do it, but I like to count, and because I like math. And I thought, okay, I have 11 stitches here. I counted, yes, I've got 11 stitches down here. So I knew that when I was linking these stitches up, that it was going to work out. Sometimes I don't have a number that, it doesn't always magically work out. But what I'm doing is making my normal stitch, but I'm going through the top loop and under the stitch that I want to anchor it to at the bottom. And you can see that's going to come together really nicely. If you don't have the exact number of stitches, sometimes I do have to, double up where I'm, sometimes I have to stitch two things into one stitch or fudge it just a little bit. As long as you don't make a big gap the way I showed over here, try to fudge it in a place that, like an edge where you can see it. So I like where you can't see it rather. So this way you can see that it's going to be fairly even. Now, I apologize. This is not my tidiest work. It's difficult to show your best work when you're standing and doing a video and stopping and starting, but I hope you can get the idea of the kinds of nice things that you can make with this. There it is with the variegated thread, and here's the fox again. And you'll see that before I stitched this, I counted how many back stitches here, how many back stitches here, how many here, and used these little sides here. This all has to be back stitch. So as I stitched across here and back and forth, I could keep track of exactly where I wanted to go and how many stitches I was making. And if it's not perfect with something like this, I think this is a Sue Spargo design. It's really nice the way she managed to have buttons stitched right over the part that's trickiest to get right.